Hey everyone, this is Brian. I am dropping in to let you know how things have been going, which is not great. I have been very sick. Not that makes it sound very much like I am dying. I am not. Well, okay, yes, I am in the way that we all are. This is actually my second time recording this, and it's not getting better, so we're just gonna keep going with it. But yeah, I've been very sick, and it's been kind of just like chain sickness where like one ends and another begins. I've had no voice and no energy, and we have not recorded, which is a bummer because I very much wanted to have a new episode for you today. Fortunately, I went into the archives and dug out this episode with Kevin O'Brien, Catherine the Great. It was a fun one, and I hope you enjoy. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks to everyone who reached out. It was very, very nice. It really made my day. Okay. Bye. February 4th, 1789. The Electoral College makes George Washington the first president. Of course, they had intended to order a pizza. Welcome to The Revisionists. I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers.
And we have a very special episode for you guys. One of Denver's finest comedians and citizens, I feel like.
I prefer Patriarch, but sure.
Patriarch. Yeah, okay. That's not where I thought you were going with that. A fine member of Denver's patriarchy, co-creator of These Things Matter, Arguments and Grievances, the beloved Kevin O'Brien.
Beloved! That's me. Hello. Thank you so much.
To think of an adjective. and I think it applies.
Yeah.
Was Patriarch
You're like
too
a
much?
Toni Morrison novel.
Did I overstate Patriarch?
He has the bluest eye, Kevin O'Brien.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's all this history I was reading today. It put me in the mind of of monarchs and establishment and bloodlines. A lot of bloodlines, you know?
Yeah, certainly nothing going on in current events would put you in the mindset of that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think of you as a patriarch, but like the patriarch of an evil hillbilly family in like a Texas Chainsaw movie.
I was going to say like the guys that drink moonshine and do their fun dances, but that was...
Sure, I mean, there's two sides to every coin.
Yeah.
You can cannibalize one night, and the next night you're blowing on a jug.
Yeah, the cannibal family probably had good times too.
I'm sure they did.
Whoever talks about that.
They made xylophones out of all them bones. Partied all night long.
I remember that cartoon.
Yeah, of course. Oh, well, listeners, if you're new, segue. It's always, each episode it gets more and more ridiculous trying to segue.
Right out the gate.
Perfect. Listeners, if you're new to the show, each episode we take a topic from history. One person presents the official version of events. Another person comes up with a crazy, batshit alternate version. And the winner gets to become the truth going forward. Tonight, we're talking about Catherine the Great. This last in our trilogy on Sophia Alexeyevna and Peter the Great.
Wait, this is a trilogy?
They're like tangentially connected, I guess.
Yeah. They're like... Yeah, they ruled sequentially, so
semi-sequentially, yeah.
Yeah, so whatever.
So cross-reference whatever I say with previous episodes to figure out what is wrong and inaccurate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure. We can... I mean, that's putting it very harshly, I feel like.
Okay.
Yeah. Last episode with Megan DePonso, the alternate history won out, which established various institutions like Raven University, I think.
Yes.
No, not Raven. Was it Raven University or Ravens Carrying Messages?
Well, it was Ravens University, but their primary method of teaching was via Raven.
Right. Okay. It was like a correspondence school.
And Peter had a lifelong obsession with establishing the first hot water park, I think it was.
Well, I thought it was just water park, and like hot was like, yeah, it's really popular.
This is a hot springs are we talking about?
I think the intention
I can get on board with that.
I think the intention was, like a hot springs park, but when I say hot water park, it does sound like a singles resort.
Yeah, it sounds like an 80s TNA movie.
Yeah, an 80s TNA movie.
You have to be a 7 or above to get into that water park.
Peter's Hot Water
You must
Park
be this hot to enter.
on VHS from Kino. This week,
Kevin, you've got the actual history. Zach, you're taking the alternate. Mm-hmm. So I think we're all ready. Kevin, you can take us away.
All right, so I'll be very accurate. History is very loose, considering. Also, I chose the accurate history because I love history, and I was like, oh yeah, it's just stories. And then I realized I knew nothing about Russian history, like at all.
No,
Yeah.
Russian history is bananas.
Like I like Anastasia. That's about my
Yeah, and I hate to reveal this to you, that animated film is not 100% accurate.
No, not even close. And
Did you know Rocky IV? Not quite true.
Well, that I don't know. They were on a lot of roids. If you look at the anti-doping agency,
Yeah, and there was that big servant butler robot boom in the mid 80s.
Happy birthday, Polly. But yeah, it was I was really taken aback about how little. Also, I thought this happened 100 years later than it actually did. Like when you think Catherine the Great, I was like, oh yeah, late 1800s, like they killed all the kids. They're like, no, that was a different revolution. Like it's like I don't know. Russian history is very dense,
As we've established, a lot of dead kids in Russian history.
dude.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like it's so dense, and and just kids dying all the time. There's also like there's never. This is one thing I find very intriguing about Russian history. There's never really a vacuum of power, yet it's constantly people trying to create a vacuum of power, right?
Yeah.
So Catherine the Great, I think, is like the best example of that in a lot of, or maybe the most modern example of that. Catherine the Great wasn't even fucking Russian, first of all.
No.
I don't know if you could tell. I don't know if you could tell by the paintings. Very plump German woman,
Yeah, I think she was born in Poland. Yeah.
Because she always has a German
or
flag.
Prussian.
in her-
Excuse me.
a little-
Yeah.
A mini German flag, and she's always eating a Kleine Schnitzel.
Well, there's something about like the German physique. You know, she has a very short, pointed nose, chubby cheeks. Like it was never really one of them.
Yeah.
And obviously so. But like her parents were both royalty, but were not actually royalty. It was like one of those things in a lot of ways. Like
One of those.
her dad. So her dad was like a German prince, but they had no money. Like just no, like it was Trump in some ways. You know what I mean? Like this idea of like if you can hang around the aristocracy and fake it long enough, you'll just become one of them.
Yeah, basically.
But on paper, you have no cash.
Yeah. That's going to be the next 4 years of him trying to be
Well-
like, no, this is what I really am.
In fairness,
is where
Trump's
I-
father definitely had cash. Trump himself, a little more debatable.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like Trump now, it's like it's more of the if you carry yourself in a certain way. So her dad was one of the princes of the German Empire or something like that. Her mom also like part of nobility and royalty, but they thought like they would have their son. Like it was like, okay, maybe we could force our kid into the back door of being like the king of Sweden or something. Like let's make a country,
Yeah, an entry-level monarchy.
which is still a monarchy.
Yeah.
Like nobody pays attention to. They were like so. Like
But
Sweden,
at the Monarch's dance, like you're getting picked last. If you go to Monarch's dodgeball, the Monarch of Sweden is like, I guess, since somebody took Prussia already.
Yeah.
well, you guys are smarter than me, I assume, with this era
That's
history.
a very dangerous assumption.
Well, I don't know as much about it, but to me, like whether it be 1800s, 1700s, whatever, it seems like Sweden was where they workshopped. Like
Yeah, it was the open mic of Russia.
in a lot of ways, well, not just Russia, but also Prussia and England, and like there was like Sweden. They were just kind of taking other European dignitaries or like the girls. Essentially, they would just be like, "Oh, you want the boy to be king? Well, we'll take your princess or whatever."
Yeah.
Sweden doesn't want to have shit to do with them at all. So Catherine the Great, she was born Sophia Holstein or something like that. She was from the House of Holstein from Prussia. But they were like, essentially her mom was like a stage mom. Like it was like Lindsay Lohan's mom, where she took her to Frederick II of Prussia, who had influence with Elizabeth, the Empress of Russia, and she pretty much Catherine the Great's mom was like, hey, what about me?
Hey,
and they're like, no, don't you have that smart daughter? And she's like, no, she's a problem, but I'm here. So it took like 3 days or some shit like that for her to find, like, the last day, Catherine the Great's mother was like, oh, she doesn't have a dress. She can't come to the ball.
Yeah.
So then Frederick II was like, get her a goddamn dress, bring her to me. Let me just see this 13-year-old with a big brain.
I mean, we're putting a lot of the blame on her mother right now, but this is a weird system.
I mean, the whole system. Well, but this is what it is. The whole system's set up in this way, like and I don't think this is something. Maybe it's an American bias or what, but up until like the 19th century, even into the World War I is indicative of this. But it's like most of monarchies. It was batshit, dude. Like there obviously no elections or anything like that. But instead of like voting somebody out of office, you just murder them and then fuck their kid, and then your kid with the person you murder's kid would then become king, and then that gave you the power somehow. Is like
maybe this is an American bias. I just love that. That was the lead-in for this objectively crazy thing.
But that's who knows.
No, I know.
But if you think about it from like the 1700s, the American experiment was the crazy thing because this is what I'm saying.
Because it involves no murder.
Yeah, right. Like
except all the murder.
The original murder.
Like there was nearly 2,000 years worth of just murder and families and coups and all of that. And then all of a sudden, some dudes who had slaves were like, hey, we're going to be over here 2,000 miles away across an ocean. We're just going to let people figure it out on their own, which was
Except
not
these other people.
Well, yeah, of course. Not the people that live there, of course. There's still a monarchy of sorts. But after all this time of Catherine the Great's mom trying to force herself into a conversation that nobody wants her to be a part of. And also Catherine the Great's dad, who, what was his name? Charles of, so German. It's the most German of Christian August, Prince of Anhalt-Zerbst.
Oh yeah. Ooh, that's the good stuff.
So he wasn't down with any of this. This
is not how we do things in Anhalt-Zerbst.
Yeah, he was a Lutheran first of all. And also a proud Prussian. And if anything, I think if you're the broke one who is attached to money, you're going to be a company man more than anybody else. Like if you watch any 80s like teen movie, it's the poorest kid who's the one who is trying to align himself with a rich kid.
Yeah, like the bully's sidekick, basically.
Yeah, exactly. A toady, if you will.
Sure, I will.
Yeah, and so that was already a conflict, but they left and they went to Berlin to meet with Frederick, and this, like, for her mom, this is her opportunity, like I said, like Lindsay Lohan's mom or something like that, or it's like, oh, well, but I'm still the star too. And the biggest problem with Catherine the Great as a teenager is she questioned things like that. I mean, that got a Kennedy lobotomized in the 60s. You know what I mean? Like, so imagine like 200 years prior to that. And so they finally so Frederick of Prussia like sized her up and was like, you know what? This is a young whippersnapper. If you got to put yourself in like, how weird is it if there's like a monarch of a country or a regionality that you're a part of, and everybody shows up and they're like, let's see this new teen bride who may work her way up, and they're all just sitting there watching a middle-aged man be so charmed by a 13-year-old, like 14-year-old, which in and of itself is weird as fuck, you know, like so bizarre. But he's like, oh, she's really got something. You know what? I'm good friends with the Empress of Russia, Elizabeth. And I think you got some moxie, kid. I think you
got the stuff.
That's right. Like the story of Catherine the Great really comes down to this was a girl who just had a lot of gumption. Like she
learned like the Runaways.
Yeah, dude. Well, and also controlled by a man, much like the Runaway. Like, but being like too smart for her own good, yet had other people see that. You know, like oftentimes when a young person is too smart for their own good, it's adult authority that comes and tries to break their will and to get them to fall in line. Mm-hmm. But with Catherine the Great, people just continually were impressed, surprised, blown away by a 13-year-old that could learn Russian out of nowhere, that would just give up her faith tradition of being a Lutheran from Germany. Not only faith, but like identity, especially if you know anything about the Germans and the Prussians. It's all about the fatherland, you know? Yeah. Like, so for her to just be like, you know, my father's poor. This all sucks.
Maybe I'll try being Russian.
My mom doesn't even like me, you know, like my brother's died, so this is the only opportunity for our family. And so Frederick the Great's like, oh, the Empress Elizabeth of Russia, you know, this young lady should have really got something. Meanwhile, Peter the Third, who is a descendant, like a great grandchild of Peter the Great, who is a descendant of Alexander the Great, you know, you see the paintings of these strapping men and like the bloodlines of conquerors of Eastern Europe and all this. And Elizabeth adopts this kid. And so Catherine the Great then shows up thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to be right there with a 15-year-old version of Alexander the Great. And instead, it's like some pasty 11-year-old alcoholic. Yeah. That's playing
his hobbies, in great Russian tradition.
Yeah. His hobbies are getting drunk and playing with toy soldiers.
Yes. And toy soldiers to really push it over the edge. But what does Catherine the Great do? She'd be like, you know what? An opportunity is an opportunity.
Yeah. Lemons out of lemonade.
But then out of nowhere, Elizabeth dies, right? So it's like, okay, so now Peter, who was adopted into the royal family of the Russians, has all of a sudden become the leader of the largest landmass and greatest empire in the tradition of his great-grandpa and Alexander the Great. And what does he do with it? Plays with his toy soldiers, just like gets drunk, doesn't fuck his wife, who's also kind of his cousin at the same time.
Who's also at the same time apparently fucking a lot of other people who aren't her husband.
I won't slut shame. Okay.
No, I'm not slut shaming. I'm just saying
because they're the big.
Got to get it where you can get it. And Peter,
he's an 11-year-old child.
He's drunk.
He's drunk.
And the big myth is like, oh, they never consummated their marriage, and it was like, well, how could they? Like, what are you
asking of these people?
Isn't that weird in and of itself? Like, I mean, this situation's very weird, but this isn't the only situation like this. Or people like Peter taking a backdoor route into a monarchy, yet there's still these forced marriages and also so much inbreeding, too. Like, the fact, in a lot of ways, it makes sense Peter III was the way that he was, because it's so like these are the people that thought to cure a disease, you just bleed the person. Like just blood. Catherine the Great even said that like bloodletting saved her life, like on 2 occasions. Yeah. But they also thought like, okay, well, we come from this like conquerous noble stock. How do we make it stronger? They're like, more of that noble stock. Let's get all these cousins fucking each other, and instead you just have a bunch of pasty hemophiliacs.
Back in the day, they called it triple distilled.
Smirnoff, huh?
Yeah, Russian
kettle
Russian.
One. Yeah. It makes so much sense in a lot of ways, but then again, it's like.
Yeah, on paper, totally.
Well, I mean, sure, their motivation makes sense, but I mean, like the way that things played out, it makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But they weren't paying any attention to any of that.
No, and
so of course you're going to have like some impotent man-child, pasty toy soldier alcoholic who gets a voluptuous, self-actualized German 15-year-old. Keep in mind, these are like 13, 14, 15-year-olds. But the fact Catherine the Great was that, maybe it speaks to German roots. I don't know. But to be that confident but calculating and to just take advantage of the opportunities, totally, when once you see what happens once she marries Peter III, it all makes sense because Peter III was only in charge for 6 months. It was like the least blissful honeymoon. Like, of course they weren't banging or anything, but in the meantime, Catherine the Great's looking around, seeing all these hulking war heroes, these Orlovs hanging around.
These not children.
Yeah. The men that look like they came out of the Alexander the Great and the Peter the Great paintings, like strapping, like just battle-worn dudes. So she's just like, well, I'll just bang these guys. Like, if this little twerp isn't going to be giving me what I want. And also, this is something I learned today, very sick and twisted about Peter III. A rat of his, or not his, that's even weirder if he had pet rats, but there was a rat that ate some of his toy soldiers that are like made of wood blocks. Also, keep in mind, these are royals and they have rats in their place. So, like, 18th century sucked.
Yeah.
Across the
As
board.
a whole. As we've discussed before, everyone smelled like shit.
Oh my God. Yeah. all the time. So, dude, so much so, like, even before Catherine the Great had this meeting with Frederick II, her mom, in fears that she was too smart for her own good, took her to all these, like, monasteries and things to show her what happens to a spinster. And one of them was, like, a distant aunt of hers who was locked up in some Greek or Russian Orthodox monastery, and she was living with 16 pugs in the room with her. And this is like 1800s too, so there was shitting everywhere. And so it traumatized Catherine the Great so much. The smell of the door opening up, and her mother like, this is what loneliness smells like. And of course it's pugs, because we all know that's the dog of a sad woman. Like,
oh, well, I was going to say now 16 pugs is like an Instagram like feed in and
Doug
of itself.
the pug, right?
Yeah.
She could have. But to be a spinster was like, that was a fate worse than death in a lot of ways. Like, it smelled worse than death.
Yeah, when you're dead, you can't smell yourself decaying.
Yeah, it's all gross. So anyways, so Peter III grabs a rat. He says it was the rat that ate all of his toys or whatever. Mm-hmm. And instead of just, first of all, to grab and be like, you were the one that did it. It's weird as fuck already.
I can punish you somehow.
Yeah, even weird. But what he does is he like hangs it up on a noose in Catherine the Great's bedroom, because they don't share their own rooms. Hangs it up in the room and puts like a sign on it of like, this is what happens to traitors. Yeah, like really sociopathic, fucked up. Like, that wouldn't fly in a group home.
Yeah.
Let alone in the House of Romanov, you know? So she's like 15, sees that, and then sees like these hulking war heroes that are like, hey, you're pretty good looking for a German gal.
You're not hanging small animals in my bedroom.
So it took like this is like Shannon Doherty level shit. Like the like, she was married for like less than a week, starts sizing up the scene, and when the opportunity strikes, and poor Peter III, like such a dandy, pasty blue blood, he's like, you know what we should do? We got this palace down on the water. You know, it's not cold here all the time. Maybe you and we just have a little getaway. She's like, yeah, that sounds great. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. And he's like, okay. And he leaves, gets there, and in that one day, Catherine the Great grabs these hunky ass war heroes and was like, so we're gonna get rid of this twerp, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm glad you said something, because we were just gonna do it anyways.
I didn't want to be the first one.
Yeah, I didn't want to be executed because I didn't know if you guys were like still together, but yeah, totally.
Yeah, on the same page.
So these two beefy brothers pretty much just abdicate the throne with Catherine the Great, and then initially she's like, well, I won't execute him. I'll leave it up to the Orlovs. And they can do what they want. So of course these dudes are just getting off, like torturing this little twerp.
They try to get him to abdicate, but from what I understand, he ends up beaten to death after offering paltry resistance to them.
He's like, no, please, I'm the king. He's like putting up his fey hands.
It's like a wooden spear. It's like bang,
Meanwhile,
bang,
they have maces, and they're just like beating over that. Where Catherine the Great finds out, she's like, oh, well, I guess they got carried away. I told them to let him live. And
that got out of hand.
I got a hand. Then 60 years later, she rules all of Russia. That's it. That's pretty much like that. It was that fast. It was like within the span of like less than 2 years, she went from, I mean, granted, she came from like, she had the access. That's the biggest difference between like a peasant and a poor noble or a poor monarch. Like you could be this is what I'm saying with Trump. Like you can be cash poor, but if you still have the access to the 1% of Prussia and Russia at that time due to titles, essentially, is what it came down to. Like her dad was given a title and her mother was given a title, and they had a connection to German, or at that time Prussian families in the monarchy, but not within the Russians. And not only did Peter III get a life preserver thrown to him from Elizabeth because of the bloodline. Well, this is the last grandchild of Peter the Great. This is how backwards this shit is too. It's got nothing to do with any actual ability or attributes or anything. But she's like, this is the last grandson or great grandson, whatever it is, to Peter the Great, who was the grandson of Alexander the Great. So she's like, it's good for business. We just bring him into the family. Yeah. She's like, I'll adopt this little twerp. It'll be fine. So that in and of itself was already some backdoor shenanigans. Then Catherine the Great goes in the side door of the back door, and within less than a year becomes the fucking princess or queen, excuse me, of the entire Russian Empire, which at that point, like, the USSR, that's what they were striving to maintain, was like they conquered all the Eastern Bloc, the wars with the Turks and the Ottoman Empire and all that. And all it took was a 15-year-old girl who spoke 2 languages, who thought a bunch of male authorities were full of shit, but to see the one way that she could sneak her way in there, and then the next 60 years unequivocally ruled all of Russia, and for the better.
Yeah.
Like arguably for the better. Ended the serf system. There was a serf system that was in place, and her being a poor nobility gave her enough empathy to realize that the feudal system was making no sense for the Russian people.
Yeah.
And also, she banged a lot of dudes.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. Like, for that period of time, like Elizabeth II had some of this as well, but to be we couldn't fucking elect Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Yeah.
But in the 18th century, 17th century, there was a couple women in England and Russia that were not only able to rule over their countries, but to be unabashed in doing so. And to have many, because Catherine the Great never married again after that. She had illegitimate children here and there, and even the son that she had with quote unquote Peter III, which everybody knows wasn't really his kid. That kid was now part of Russian nobility and part of the monarchy. Yeah. So they don't really care about bloodlines.
Yeah.
It's all about it's who's in power, right? It's who's in power and who has a connection to power. So if Catherine the Great's in power, she has illegitimate children. She's like hooking up with these war soldiers and heroes and stuff. Everybody's like, all right, that's all right.
Yeah, well, that's foreign diplomats and leaders also.
Yeah, that's the
people. She installed the prince of some country who was just a guy she was fucking, and she was like, I like fucking you. How about you have this country?
And that's the new nobility.
I just imagine her saying that, and she pins a medal on his chest. Yeah. Good dick.
Well, did you see her? That is like a Purple Heart, man.
I imagine
she was a beefy lady.
Well, I also imagine like 18th century Russia, much like today, really thirsty for good dick, basically.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of it.
Well, and I think maybe that's probably the most impressive thing about Catherine the Great is that not only, not the thirsty for dick thing, but at like how thirsty the Russians were for any sort of, because she was an authoritarian based off of the coup and that sort of thing. But as a leader, it was, like I said, to end the feudal system, to brush back the Ottoman Empire. Fucking Crimea was huge back then. Like, that was like a point of contention to make sure the Turks didn't get Crimea. Sound fucking familiar to anybody? Yeah. Like, and so it was like, it's so fascinating how quickly the Russians were willing to fall in line behind a German, not only a German, but a poor German woman, based off of essentially one action. I mean, there was a lot of things that led up to that, obviously, but the act of the coup of the little pasty twerp that everybody knew was that, endeared her to her people. Even though they weren't really her people, they became her people. Because I would imagine for the Russians at that time, it felt like a revolution, even though it wasn't, especially compared to 100 years later with the Russian Revolution. It wasn't only one person died as opposed to like 12 or whatever.
12,
or whatever, whoever, like back. Well, and that was different too, because the people were the ones that were involved in the uprising. But to have that much power and to endear yourself and ingratiate yourself with the steeliest of populations, which is the Russians, as a 15-year-old girl is so impressive. Like honestly, if she would have grown up today, she would have been like, if you were to take Beyonce and Hillary Clinton and mash them up into like the most powerful, likable woman of the 20th century. Because that's essentially what it was. Like her reign lasted over 50 plus years, you know? Like, and that's incredible to me in a lot of ways. But also fucked up, dude.
I will say, as a point of clarification, because I could be wrong about this too, but based on what I read, the only critique I have of that is that I don't think she ended the serf system. What I read was she had personally about 500,000 serfs, and the Russian Empire had 2.9 million. And her approach to the serfs was mostly, I really don't want to deal with any of this, and they were mostly unhappy during her reign. But she was great on education,
but you know that
and she really advanced the bureaucracy of the state.
Well, yeah.
Well,
and also and you're totally right. But it's like she moved the goalpost inward more.
Sure.
On all that stuff, but fucking Thomas Jefferson, right?
Right.
Like to own slaves, yet also that all men are created equal. It's that same sort of like there is which I think says a lot about the times, is that there can be a level of cognitive dissonance. Is that you know that something is wrong or you don't agree with it, but based off of the power structure, you're willing to just like go along, or it's like an incremental change, and that she was there's a lot of similarities in a lot of stuff.
Everything. Like she conquered a bunch of lands. From everything I read, she was great in almost every. She was surprisingly progressive about integrating Islam. The only two areas I saw any real critique were she didn't do that as good a job with the serf system as she could have, and she tried to integrate Jews and it just didn't work. So she was like, all right, Jews are not part of Russia. And she created that area where Fiddler on the Roof takes place.
Yeah, the shtetl.
But that was like 100 plus years later before. That's what I mean. Like
but that gave us Fiddler on the Roof.
It did give us Fiddler on the Roof.
Thank you, Catherine the Great.
Co-author of Fiddler on the
Roof. Sunrise, sunset.
Tradition.
Tradition. There's many traditions. Normally us being persecuted.
This is now a radio play of Fiddler on the Roof.
I love Fiddler on the Roof.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Kevin, thank you.
Thank you. No, I'm sorry I got carried away.
No,
I got so into this over the past couple of days.
Zach, if you're ready with the alternate.
Yeah, so we covered a lot of stuff, like that she was born in Poland in 1729, right? And through political connections through her parents and through Frederick, eventually she was betrothed, sort of arranged into a marriage with Peter, who she did not care a great deal for. But she did like the current Empress of Russia, Elizabeth, who took a shine to her too. And Elizabeth,
kind of, like that's weird too, right? Because like Elizabeth seems to me like she always wanted a daughter but never got one.
Yeah.
So she went to Prussia to like
she shopped around.
She's like writing cryptic notes to just her, like. Like royalty writing, like imagine if like somebody was private texting your 12-year-old daughter, and then it's like, oh, it's also Margaret Thatcher, like that, or it's Hillary Clinton, and you'd be like, whoa, super weird. Like
to be fair, Elizabeth's approach to Catherine's mom was also like, fuck that lady, she sucks,
and rightfully so.
Yeah. But Elizabeth herself, of course, came to power because she kind of overthrew Ivan IV, who was...
Is he the terrible one?
No, he was, when he was implemented as the ruler, like 6 months old. And ran and ruled the country for like 4 years, and Elizabeth successfully like overthrew him and his family. And he,
that's a very easy overthrow.
Wait, she took his toys away?
Let's put him face down in a crib.
And he ended up basically in solitary confinement for 12 years.
As a 5-year-old, 4-year-old?
Yeah, as a super little kid, yeah.
Whoa.
And then
were they just feeding him fish heads down there?
Yeah, pretty much. He was like the attic Bart in that episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, yeah.
But yeah, and
Attic.
the story goes that he was eventually killed when people tried to use him to overthrow Catherine, and
like I know what
before
you mean
they
when
could
you
free
say
him,
that, but-
before they could free him, Catherine had standing orders like, if somebody tries this shit, just kill him.
This poor bastard.
Yeah.
Just a pawn his entire life.
But the fact of the matter is, Elizabeth actually knew the truth, which was that Ivan was the horrible Antichrist come again in baby child form, and she had to overthrow him for the good of all mankind. Because as we all know...
It's like fucking Omen 3.
Correct.
Damien becomes the president.
Damien's vengeance.
Because as we all know, Ivan of Russia is an anagram for a favor is sin. It's also an anagram for I favor in ass and I favor anus, sis. So maybe
So a lot of butt stuff.
but they got this one right. He was evil.
Yeah, that was the smear campaign against Ivan.
Russians are notorious homophobes as well.
Correct. And he cultivated his dark power in his underground cell. He was called Ivan of the Underdark. And Peter was his pawn. It was, in fact, Ivan the Terrible's worm, which we established earlier. He had a hell worm that could possess people.
Yep.
And he possessed Peter III to be Ivan's pawn because Ivan's got to stick together.
Yeah.
Oh.
You know.
This is the other thing. So many motivations with Russian politics and
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, some
Nobility.
people have a very strong pro-anus agenda.
Correct. It could be two things. So when Peter secretly killed Elizabeth, Catherine knew she had to do something about it and knocked off Peter, but knew that one day Ivan might rise again from the Underdark. And so she began her progressive campaign of education. Because as we've established earlier, a lot of Russians had this from an earlier episode, I think the Sofia Alexeyevna's episode. Russian men knew that Russian women had latent magical and or telekinetic abilities. Mm-hmm. And so she decided to harness those abilities, and she founded the Moscow Foundling Home, or the Moscow Orphanage, to teach young Russian children about magics.
Is this like a Professor Xavier thing or like a Hogwarts thing?
yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like
I'm going to
the
have
X-Men.
my cake and eat it too.
It's both.
Now, this closed because there was a high mortality rate.
The look at the thing your eyebrows did when you said that to me.
Oh.
This closed because there was a high mortality rate, mostly because the staff was very irresponsible. They were having these children do things they should not be doing as teenagers, like fighting dragons and flying high above the ground. Kids are going to die. But during this time, Ivan would attack this school consistently. Conveniently, there would be a mystery that would last all year, and then the major event would happen at the end of the year every single time. Very, very scheduled. But they did, to their credit, before they closed down, perfect Ivan, the game from the Ivan the Terrible episode, the goat slaughtering game with the snitch. Yeah, they perfected that. And they got rid of most of the goat slaughter.
Really tying a bow in this series of episodes.
It's a trilogy. We got to bring it all together.
I'm glad I picked the right side of this.
So after that failed, she realized, as Russian nobles knew all along, Russian females were more powerful, and she established the Solmny Institute for Noble Girls, where Professor Solmny, a wheelchair-bound woman, taught the children to harness their psychic ability to fight Ivan of the Underdark. In the meantime, Catherine was taking many lovers across all of Europe and in Russia, not just for pleasure, although also for pleasure.
Oh, it depends on the experience.
Yeah. But
Not
also,
everybody can finish the job.
to gain information about Ivan's growing evil network, which we're just going to say was called Spectre with a K because it sounds more Russian. And eventually, she did, near the end of her life, face off against Ivan of the Underdark. She gained an ancient artifact that could trap his soul, called the Compelling Orb. That's not from anything, I think. I just made it up.
It sounds very convincing.
And in her final confrontation of her, she died. A lot of people thought it was a stroke, but no, she died successfully trapping Ivan in this orb, where he may or may not still be to this day.
Oh, no.
Future episodes may or may not bear that out. We very rarely make callbacks.
But, you're invited to now.
But that was her legacy. And also...
That's what made her so great.
And peasants were kind of unhappy under her. But otherwise, that was her legacy. So that was my alternate history I threw together this afternoon.
Oh, wait, that was alternate? I thought I just missed that chapter when I was reading.
Oh, it was a thick one.
That was very
yeah.
believable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The orb, I remember reading about the orb, right?
Yeah, it didn't really fit in if you missed the chapter about the evil lord of Russia.
And the competing schools of mutants and magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That was the Muslims, right? Those are the competing schools of magic at the time.
The Somni
Turks were Professor X. Was he the Ottoman Empire?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the Turks were X-Force, I think.
Oh, okay.
The Somni Institute for Noble Girls was a real thing. She was interested in educating women better, but the name was just so close for the Xavier Institute for Gifted Youngsters. I couldn't.
Pretty good.
Well, Zach, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, I was carried away by Kevin's enthusiasm.
Imagine if I would have had my notes in front of me. I would have had dates and names. Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's why you kept calling her Crud Bump the Great.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that fucking broad, right?
Russian lady. Yeah, she's great. On the other hand, I always appreciate a good X-Men and Harry Potter callback.
Wait, is this a competition? Is there a winner?
And there was James Bond in there too.
Well,
You pick a winner?
Female James Bond.
Yeah,
Hashtag
and-
after Craig.
Soon enough.
if it couldn't be Idris Elba, let's let it be.
Oh, it should be Idris Elba. You'd be the best.
Idris Elba should be everything.
Yeah.
In my alternate history,
He is
Idris Elba
everything.
was James Bond. Did I not mention that part?
Okay, well then I have to give it to Zach.
I can't rewrite.
Oh no, I'm with you. If Idris Elba's involved, I'm gonna give it to Zach as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Zach. Before we leave, Nighttime Tonight, the new show at Deer Pile, starts February 16th. We have
Oh, cool.
fucking great lineup. It's a live late night show. Great lineup for the first one.
Oh, really? I
Jose
gotta check that out.
McCall. Yeah, Zach Welch. Kira McKalen and Mara Wiles is headlining.
Never heard of her.
No, never, of course.
The other three are funny though. I know that much.
But that's February 16th at 9 p.m. The thing we're doing is each show, all the donations we collect will go to a different group that will probably need support in the new
Stand-up
America.
comedians.
Fair point.
Improv
Fair point.
comedians.
Yeah, right. We are collecting donations, the first show for the Marshall Project.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is a nonprofit that does journalism centered around the criminal justice system. So come check out that show. It's going to be fucking amazing. That's February 16th. Next one is March 16th. More details on that.
Is it both of you guys?
Um,
Oh, who's the host? I'm sorry, I don't know anything about this show.
no, it hasn't.
Brian is going to play like the primary sort of host of it. I'm part of the team that is help writing it, and I will probably appear as various side characters.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, man. That's the way
Yeah.
to do it.
And there'll also be special guests for that show.
Cool.
And Kevin, you're going to be leaving us soon.
Yeah, big
not
city.
not to die, but to go to New York.
No, bigger and better things. Oh,
Yeah.
no offense to this podcast. This is
No,
really
that's fine.
fun.
That's-
I didn't mean to insult the thing.
No, we're better than the city of New
Yeah,
York.
we're bigger than New York.
Our economy is huge.
That's our John Lennon
Thanks for having
statement.
some self-awareness. You guys are like the only people left in Denver that have some self-awareness. And like, off to bigger and better things. People are like, what's wrong with us?
Yeah.
And I was like, that right there.
Yeah, exactly.
That exact reaction.
We got everything. There's breweries where you can have dogs.
Ugh.
We got everything.
My rent will be the
Hey.
same as it is in
Yeah,
New York.
A brewery where you could have a dog and a coffee shop where you can have a cat.
And a comedy show.
Yeah, exactly. There's a comedy.
Go to Mutiny Information.
Guys, Denver is great.
That's my plugs for Mutiny.
Denver is a very fun city, but many other cities have other things going for them.
No, Denver's great. I've been here too long. That's the perspective I'm taking now. Is like, nobody likes the guy that's talking about how great things used to be.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, I took this opportunity. I'm going to remove myself from the equation.
To walk into the cornrows
But,
and
know,
just sort of...
Well, that's the next move.
To be fair, for the next 4 years, we're all the guy who talks about how great things used to be.
That's fine. That's your cross to bear, man. I'm not going to be the one doing that. But yeah, I do Funny Side Sessions. We got one more show on March 2nd at Image Brew Studios. It's a fun show.
It's a very fun show. And you
Mara
can check out the
Wiles
sketches on Funny or Die.
Yeah, we're on Funny or Die YouTube, Vimeo, which is under Funny Side Sessions. A lot of stuff that me and Mara Wiles and some other friends of ours, Jordan Dahl and Aaron Urist, and some other people have helped us write. We put all those up online, and hopefully we'll do something similar to that once we move to New York. But we don't know until that happens. But in the meantime, yeah, come. And I'm doing a lot of shows for the rest of February as well. Because, man, if you want to get booked locally at some room you didn't care to do in the first place, just tell people you're moving. So
yeah, I'm moving to a new city every month, just trying to fucking get off.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's like I've done stand up here for 8.5+ years, and people are like, "Hey, can you MC or feature my show?" It's like, yeah, I guess I'll take it.
Yes, sentimental reasons.
Or just like, I don't want to seem like a snob, but it's
right,
like,
no.
It would have been nice to get the headlining spot 2 weeks before I moved.
Right. But also the Arguments and Grievances podcast.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't do the show in Denver anymore. That ended in November, but we are reformatting, I guess. I don't know what the right word is. We're not rebranding, but we're
repackaging.
The show in Denver doesn't exist anymore, obviously, and then the show in Chicago is coming to an end in April, I believe, and then after that, we're going to be strictly in New York and LA. So we're going to put all our effort in the podcast as well, which is on iTunes and also on the Sexbot comedy page and things like that.
Yep.
But hopefully, after the next couple months, we're only going to have, big New York City comedians on there. And these LA Heat,
Yeah, your first guess is fucking Pizza Rat or whatever.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That's a get.
Get him?
He didn't have a lot to say, but man, he brought a lot of energy.
Yeah,
and pizza. He brought pizza. So how could
he
you
just puts butts in the seats is the thing.
Pretty much. Yeah. And we're looking for a venue. I think we're probably going to be at the People's Improv Theater in New York.
Nice.
March 31st, but that's not entire. I don't know why I'm plugging things that I'm not sure are booked or not.
Yeah.
But leave it in. Who cares? It's probably right.
Zach, Stage of Fools is...
Continues for a couple more weeks. It's off until the 12th, so there won't be a new episode until probably the 17th
What
or
is
so.
Stage of Fools?
It's
Is it
another
a stage
podcast
show?
I do that revolves around a horrible television show on the E-Television network.
Oh, the worst.
Yeah, it's their first scripted drama, and it's loosely based on Hamlet. So there you go.
Wait,
Incredibly loosely based.
Very loosely
is
based.
this Unreal? Are you talking about Unreal?
No, it's called The Royals. Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Unreal is a great show.
I haven't watched-
The Royals is... garbage.
I haven't watched Unreal, so
Unreal
I
has a
have no
good
idea.
first season and an
Yeah,
mediocre.
that's fair.
I hate the E Network.
Yeah, it's not good.
I love pop culture, but I hate the E Network.
Yeah.
Well, what a weird ending, huh?
Right. Well,
Just hate on another network.
Yeah, right. As for me, Funny Final Four at Comedy Works, April 7th.
Oh, yeah, man.
Check that out. Kevin, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry I talk too much.
No, that's...
It's what I do.
Zach, thank you as always.
Of course, yep.
For everyone here at The Revisionist, I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers.
Have a good time.